Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Carrie Clack, columnist, editorial board.
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
Nancy Pryor-Johnson, deputy editorial board editor.
Today we're going to talk about the District 1 and District 7 city council runoffs that happened last Saturday. And we're going to kind of give some early thoughts on what should be a really interesting 2025 mayoral election. We've had some long, suspenseful election nights in San Antonio over the years. Saturday night was not one of them. I think the results were pretty clear when the early voting totals came in a little bit after 7 p.m. And the result is that we're going to have 2 new members of City Council, both of them women. We're now going to have 7 women on City Council out of 11, which is remarkable. And in District 1, we had 9 City Council incumbents, including the mayor, who were on the ballot in 2023. 8 of them won. The one exception was District 1, which covers downtown and the center city. And you had Mario Bravo, after one term, getting voted out of office, defeated by education consultant Sukh Kaur. She won with about 59%. In District 7, we had Marina Gavito defeating Dan Rossiter about a 62-38 margin. And I wanted to start with District 1, and this was, I think it's fair to say this was the more interesting race, and though it was not a close race in the end, I mean, it was surprising if you had asked any of us what was going to happen at the beginning of the year, we probably wouldn't have anticipated this. It's always hard beating a city council incumbent. Sukh Kaur did it, in pretty commanding fashion. Greg, when you look at what happened with Mario Bravo there and why she beat him, what stands out to you?
Oh, I mean, just the fact that, I think she was a strong candidate, and I think she ran like a really good campaign, but she wouldn't have won if he hadn't been the subject of a no confidence vote because of his verbal assault of city councilwoman Anna Sandoval in September. I think that's where everything started. Mm-hmm. He could have survived, even given the controversy with construction and road projects around, close into the downtown area. They've been taking forever. They've been hurting small businesses. And there's been an outcry among those small business owners, particularly on the St. Mary's Strip. My gut tells me he could probably have survived that. Mm-hmm. But that in combination with, the confrontation, like the incident in September with Councilwoman Sandoval, sunk him. And then to a lesser extent, you've got the controversy over the Migrant Resource Center on San Pedro Avenue, which was in District 1, created a lot of friction with neighbors. A lot of what was underscoring that was how you feel about immigrants coming into San Antonio. I mean, there are things, he was powerless to do anything about. I think a lot of neighbors were just upset that there was a Migrant Resource Center close to where they live, but And
he talked about trying to actually have it moved out of District 1,
yeah.
And but one of the things that you talked about, the North St. Mary's Strip construction. This was a project that began before he
right.
was elected to City Council, and I think to be fair to him, there were construction problems that really didn't have too much to do with him. But maybe there was a poor communication from his office early on. I think that was what some people in the area said. But it sort of tied into frustration among business owners, club owners. Mm-hmm. There was some feeling that both with North St. Mary's Strip and other areas in the district that he would side with neighborhood associations if they complained about clubs, if they complained about too much noise or parking issues or other things. Mm-hmm. And there was something that San Antonio Current wrote about recently where you had, I think McIntyre's, they had a police raid. He said on Twitter that when people asked, he said his office had nothing to do with it. And ultimately he had to admit that someone in his office had called the police in response to neighborhood complaints. Right. So that was a lot. There was a lot on social media about that. And I'm always reluctant to put too much weight on social media, but he was definitely getting a lot of criticism from club owners. Nancy, what do you think what happened in that race?
I blame it on downtown. I mean, I live downtown now. I live on Broadway. And I have to say, when I went to go vote on Saturday, I thought about about the mess on Broadway.
Sure.
And so that is something I kept in mind. I think, one of the biggest thing against Sukh was the charter school connection, right? And what I say to that, and, my thinking too, and, I'm very pro public school, but I've worked at a charter school as well back when I was a teacher. So only 1 year of my 9 years as a teacher was at a charter school. So that is not the boogeyman right now in education. It's private vouchers, not charter schools. So that's a hard argument to make against her. She was a great candidate, and obviously the voters decided that too. I think it did to me come down to the construction and just like the lack of urgency there. It seemed like on Broadway, St. Mary's. I did see during campaigning that some of the clubs there on St. Mary's were campaigning for Sukh and, having events and everything, and the flyers were all over the place. And people were just frustrated. But you're right. I mean, as far as with the homeowners association and, the noise, I know in our apartment, the noise from the social spot is, wow. I sleep with earplugs every night. So it's a hard thing to balance, right? The HOAs and the business community, but that's her job, and so we'll see how she does, right?
I'm looking forward to if you all are okay with this. I'm going to vent a little bit on the charter school issue. I had some thoughts on that, but Carrie, I wanted to kind of see what you thought about the District 1 race.
See, I think it comes down to the outbursts. I don't think the construction work, any of that matters. I mean, yes, some concern, but as you said, that was going on before he got there. And we knew this was going to be an issue, the outburst. And I think Sukh was may have been the first candidate who filed for that challenge him.
Sure.
And she didn't really make it an issue, but it was like she didn't have to. Her presence as the only woman, and I'm fairly confident that if he had not had the outburst, that first of all, I'm not even sure, and I don't think we asked her this when she came before the board twice, if she was going to run anyway. But I just don't. I think you take away the outburst, and I think Bravo joins his other colleagues in being reelected.
The outburst was a really big deal for me, obviously. And when we met with him, and we, obviously wrote about that as well. When Anna Sandoval left, though, to me, I'm like, well, obviously it showed a lot about his character. He did apologize, and he did say he's getting help for that. But to me, that kind of like a threat or that, negative morale issue as well, was removed when Anna was no longer there. It did seem like the other city council members were able to work together with him and get things accomplished, despite all of that. Yeah. So that's kind of how I felt on that issue. If Anna was still in the city council, it would have been completely different. That would have been the top issue.
One of the things that was interesting is how the race divided the progressive community in District 1, and you had some hardcore progressives. I would put in maybe the Bernie Sanders progressive camp who were very pro Mario, and it was an odd thing because I know of some who were very critical of council members who didn't support Prop A, the police reform proposition. And yet Mario took no stand on Prop A. Just like 2 years ago, he took no stand on Prop B, which was a police reform effort. And Sukh actually supported Prop A, although she had some misgivings as the campaign went on. So there were some oddities about this. But I wanted to talk about the charter school thing, and I'm glad you brought it up, Nancy, because this really became like the big issue among the loyalists, the Mario Bravo loyalists who were critical of her. And she's an education consultant. She's worked with charter schools, and she got some advertising help from Charter Schools Now PAC, an Austin-based political action committee. The thing I wanted to look at, because there's so many things. His campaign, Mario's campaign in the runoff, they sent out mailers criticizing her for receiving money from charter schools and working with charter schools. And his supporters were out there just basically saying that there was something sinister going on. Why doesn't she talk about this charter? What did the charter schools? What is this PAC hoping to get from her? What's going on? And it got really heated. And the thing that stood out to me is, city council is really not in a position where they can do anything related to charter schools. They have no control over charter school funding. They have no control over whether a charter school gets approval. That happens at the state level. The funding ultimately comes from the state. They can't do anything. I mean, I've heard people saying, well, they could turn down a zoning request. And this. I mean,
small potatoes.
When does that happen?
Yeah. And so it's not. No, I mean, to me, the charter school, her support by charter school interests was, it's, if you're Mario Bravo and his campaign organizers, of course you're going to use it. It is the cudgel you have at hand, particularly given what's happened with public schools in the legislature that just ended. So it totally makes sense. But as an issue, it doesn't make sense because you're right. It has nothing to do, the city council has almost nothing to do with education in San Antonio. However, you could, and I don't think that this isn't how, Mario's supporters talked about it. But I mean, you could look at her involvement with charter schools and say, okay, well, this could say something about how she treats or thinks about public services. And I mean, because it's essentially, it's the privatization of public education, right? And you could extend that into stuff city council actually does. But I think that's a bit of a stretch.
This is the best argument I've heard.
I acknowledge it. No. I acknowledge it's a stretch. And it's not what her detractors were talking about. They were talking about this very specific thing. I'm just saying it could say something about how she thinks about public services.
Yes. And I think that his campaign thought, well, she doesn't have a lot of experience. That's maybe the strongest thing we've got against her. But that doesn't work too well on a mailer. Right. So we're going to just say her values are all wrong.
Yeah.
So you make some good points there. The one thing
seems skeptical.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. But I just think that it's kind of, because people were saying, well, what this is going to be so damaging in San Antonio. I thought, well, how is she going to do this? And when did Mario Bravo in his 2 years ever block a charter school from or even talk about charter schools? Exactly. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is we have former council member Ray Saldana spent nearly 3 years of his time on the city council working as the chief engagement officer for KIPP Schools, which is a charter school organization. And I don't remember any criticism there. And I think Ray Saldana was a great council member. And I think, and there's no question about his commitment to public schools. I mean, we know that. But I'm just saying that where were these people when this was happening? And we have a state representative, Barbara Gervin Hawkins, who also is very committed to public education, but she formed and ran a charter school, the Gervin Academy. And again, I don't, and she's actually in a position, the state legislature actually has a little more influence over school funding. So I thought the whole thing was really disingenuous. The last thing I wanted to say about that is that the charter schools now PAC, which basically paid for advertising. I think they had nearly $9,000 in advertising on her behalf. She raised about $125,000. She did all right. I don't think this, because there was a lot of stuff. She's going to be a puppet of the charter schools. She was. They didn't make or break her on this one. She did well fundraising, particularly after the general election. And also, this charter schools now PAC, they have given to a lot of Republicans. There's no question about it. But they have also contributed to some Democrats who are ardent public school supporters, including Trey Martinez Fisher, Sinfronia Thompson, Carol Alvarado. So it was kind of, I think that they were using this to say she's some kind of right-wing figure. And I think that's kind of getting to what you were talking about, that this says something about her values. And so I thought that I found myself getting kind of annoyed by the way this issue was being used, and especially because it was getting so intense on social media. So I just wanted to say that.
But not so intense that it mattered.
It mattered. I know.
Yeah. Because, I mean, she still swept the floor with them.
She did.
So,
And I thought if he had a chance, it was. I mean, that was going to be the issue because that was really what they were pushing. Went to talk a little bit about District 7, which covers is West Side, Northwest Side district. And it's a seat that was open because Ana Sandoval stepped down a few months ago. You had Marina Gavito. She has worked with I think SA Digital Connect. She was a chief engagement officer, or she was chief executive officer, and has now been a strategic advisor for the past few months. Dan Rossiter, who was running against her in the runoff. I think the only real big issue that I saw was that he was talking about the fact that she should have stepped down from her position there, because she didn't. She did step down from chief executive officer, but stayed on with the nonprofit, and he complained about that. She's got a lot of history in the district. She's got her family has been very involved in politics. I mean, did this seem like a pretty obvious thing she was going to win?
I mean, you can take the lineage, and there they are right now. Chris Alderete, who until just, I believe it was in December, until then she was chairwoman of Port San Antonio. So that's kind of a big deal. That's a city appointed board. And Joe Alderete was city councilman for District 7 from the late 70s through the mid, I think it's 1984, 85. So she had the family background, but if you just separate that out, she was we're in kind of an era of kind of really grassroots, kind of chaotic politics. Hers was a very traditional, I mean, she looked like a mainstream, competent city council candidate. And, she had all of her ducks in a row. And I think, it's the success of that is apparent.
She's worked with USAA, Space. She's got a lot of business support. She had some heavy hitters like Nelson Wolf, Justin Rodriguez, who has represented the district in the past, coming out for her. So it was, I think Dan Rosser, he's bright. I think he's 32, young guy. He's been very involved in various organizations. I think we're going to be hearing more from him. But this was just, I think it was pretty clear from the beginning this was going to be her seat to lose.
What'll be interesting with her is we'll see, her background is in tech. So I mean, she worked for Rackspace Technology at USAA, which is insurance and financial services. She was involved in their innovation program. Basically, she scouted for it's called FinTech, financial technology startups. That would kind of augment what USAA does. And then she went from there too. And she was also, I think she was a founding director or member of Tech Block, the trade, right. The organization backing tech in San Antonio. And then she moved on to SA Digital. Anyway, so I'll be really curious to see how that plays out on council, like what her agenda will be as far as technology in San Antonio.
Yeah, and she's talked about expanding broadband and that sort of thing. Anything stand out to you, Nancy, about that?
I mean, it didn't surprise me. I expected her to do well as well. I mean, I think just historically, right, Latinas do well in San Antonio as well in elections, and she's a solid candidate. So I think she was also just inducted to the San Antonio Women's Hall of Fame this last time. That was pretty recent as well. Yeah. So, and you don't get on there just for no reason. So.
It was almost inevitable. And it's like everything aligned, the bloodlines, and it just, and I think just going back to Rossiter, I mean, for him to have won, it would have been one of those historic, like when Patty Rado won or Art Hall won, district when it comes to ethnicity. But she's going to be one of the. It's going to be interesting. It's going to see how long does it. Well, we're about to move into this next phase of the discussion. That just how long she is on council. I think she really does have I think she's any politician's ambition, but I think she does have a bright future.
Yeah.
And also girl power on this council.
Well, I was going to say, one thing I forgot to mention is that with Sukh's election, I think she's the first woman elected in District 1 since Mary Alice Cisneros, I think. It's been 12 years.
Okay.
So,
that's right.
I think generally you've had men in that district. I mean, I'd have.
Interesting, yeah.
So, now that we've got this behind us, because we can't help but do this, we're already kind of thinking a little bit. And I'll say this. I mean, I think we have good reason to maybe look ahead.
I was going to say Manny Plies made this easy.
Yeah, he made this easy. Manny Plies. It's been the worst kept secret in San Antonio over the past year or so that Manny Plies is very interested in running for mayor. And last week he put out a message to his to San Antonians, basically acknowledging that there's been some talk or saying that people have been asking questions.
Yeah,
it's always that thing.
It's funny. Like, I would never dream of doing this myself. People have been coming to me.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
I love that trope.
Yeah. Oh man, it's great. So he said, people are asking me. So with that in mind, I wanted to send out this survey. Tell me what your priorities are, so we can let's start a conversation about the city going forward, which is like really kind of the first blast in.
Actually, you could see it before. I mean, during the Prop A election, like he was extremely outspoken. He was probably the most outspoken council member against Prop A. And he ran a full page ad in a Sunday Express News, which is not cheap, just blasting Prop A. He kind of couched it as, hey, this is, I represent District 8, but this is a city issue. To me, that was, it wasn't part of his District 8 re-election campaign. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
He was positioning himself in part for the next mayor's race, the one after the what was coming up. And it's funny. I tried to contact him for an interview. Just like it never seemed to happen because he knew why I wanted to talk to him.
And he's usually a pretty approachable guy.
He normally is, but I think he just did not want to talk about running for mayor when he didn't even have his District 8 reelection passed yet. Sure. So, but it's this has been in the wind for months and months.
And the reason I think we have a good excuse to talk this early, at least a little bit about the next mayor's race, is that this is going to be the first open seat that we've had for mayor since 2009. And Ron Nuremberg is going to be term limited out. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if we go back to 2009, there was a sense of inevitability around Julian Castro's campaign that time. He had lost in 2005, came back in 2009. I think probably there were people thinking of running who stayed out because he was clearly the front runner. Trish DeBerry got in kind of late, kind of the business community candidate, but we knew he was going to win that year. So as far as a race that had some real uncertainty, I think we have to go back to 2005 when we had the Hardberger Castro runoff, and this is going to be a wild one like that. I mean, Manny Pelaez looks like he's going to run. Melissa Cabello Haverda has. I think it's. My sense is that she's very interested. I also think we're likely to see former council members and or members of the legislature. It's for Democrats in the legislature. It's a pretty frustrating experience, and I think a lot of them get burnt out trying to get stuff done when the odds are really against them. And we saw Justin Rodriguez leave the legislature to come back to local government to serve on the commissioner's court. We saw Ina Minjares leave the legislature to run for county judge. We could see something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. It's a really good point. I mean, it is an exhausting time in our capital, and maybe they feel like they'd have a better chance of making change here and making more of an impact. Hate to lose some of those people in the Capitol because we need them, but at the same time, maybe they could do more here.
It was a really trying legislative session too this year.
Yeah,
it's all and,
still not over.
That's true. I know. I see.
Yeah.
What I'm doing.
What's fascinating about this race is that we don't know who the candidates are going to be, except for probably Manny, but you can almost predict it's going to be a runoff. Because you're gonna have some major names. I think it's gonna be one of those elections where you're gonna have someone from the business community, a name that's gonna from the outside that's gonna come in.
Manny's done something really interesting here, though. I mean, basically everything he does of any import over the next 2 years is going to be looked at through the prism of his candidacy.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, he could. My guess is he's going to take pretty strong positions on citywide issues. He's never really shied away from controversy. So I think he will probably manage to get the spotlight on himself a lot over the next 2 years, and that's going to have an effect in the next mayor's race.
Well, that's what I was wondering too, because it is a unique situation. It will remind me a little bit of the time when Ivy Taylor was mayor, and everybody knew Ron Nirenberg was interested in running against her, and there was that friction you could just feel leading up to it, even before he declared. And I'm thinking, if you got 2 or possibly 3 or 4 members of city council who are thinking about running, like what's that dynamic when they're all
and plus, how do you think Nirenberg feels about what Manny has done here? I mean, he's heading into his final 2 years. Can anybody say what his agenda is? I mean, it's kind of fuzzy. We don't know what's going to happen with Ron Nirenberg over the next 2 years, and now you've got a council member who is openly positioning himself for the next mayor's race. And
when was the last time that we had at least 2 sitting council members run for mayor? Would it be Garza and Banworth?
No, it would have been Castro and
Schubert.
Gerald Schubert.
Yeah, so that's 20 years.
I keep forgetting about Schubert.
But that's a long time. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, and you had in 2009 you had Diane Ciprian.
That's right.
And Sheila McNeil.
I think Sheila McNeil might have been term limited out. That
is she okay?
I think so. I think not Diane Ciprian, but I think at that point we still had.
Yeah. And neither one of them were front runners. I mean,
That's true.
Nobody really thought that they had a shot.
Yeah. Well, that's not the last that you're going to hear us talk about the upcoming mayor's race, but there's going to be a lot, and I think it would probably be useful to really pay close attention to the actions and the rhetoric of some of the council members, and see what messages they're sending us. Hope everyone's doing well. We really appreciate everyone listening, and we'll be back soon. Take care.